Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 News. Media Day is done in Imola and big questions being raised as to what is going to be happening this weekend. Is it the start of the fight back for Ferrari and McLaren in the championship, or will Red Bull shut that down ASAP? They themselves have a massive upgrade this weekend. The edge of this floor is absolutely unbelievable. What have Red Bull pulled off here? Is this Newey's effectively final upgrade before departing for Ferrari? Adrian Newey also confirming today he will be returning to the sports. Very much on Twitter, your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. This organised by Sebastian Vettel, who was there this weekend, was basically a 30-year, since the passing of Ayrton Senna tribute, and of course Roland Ratzenberger as well, who was also honoured, which I thought was very nice to see. And it was Seb in the Red Bull paddock today, in the Red Bull pit wall, shall we say, getting ready for the rest of the weekend with a quite spectacular looking Red Bull RB20. Several other things they mentioned on the day. The driver's interview, press briefing, was rather fascinating from multiple angles. Ollie Bearman, of course, not currently a Formula 1 driver, but will be very shortly, we think, for Haas, and is testing this weekend in FP1 for Haas themselves. FIA mud flaps, or the new wheel covers that we saw last week tested by Ferrari to try and stop the spray in the wet conditions. Apparently, that didn't really work. Am I surprised? No, because the diffuser causes most of the spray, not the tyres. So sure, you can cover the tyres. That might reduce the spray from the tyres by 20-30%. But the tyres are only 20-30% of the total spray, so it's probably never going to do that much. They can't realistically cover the diffuser. Bearman's thoughts are, it ain't going to work effectively, but maybe they can find some way to help. But right now, it ain't looking good for those, wheel covers that, of course, caused lots of discussion a few days ago. Kevin Magnussen as well, because obviously a couple of weeks ago, Miami happens, Lando Norris wins the Grand Prix. Magnussen was, shall we say, driving all over the road to keep Hamilton behind and making some rather questionable decisions. Now, Magnussen isn't happy that, he drove outside of the white lines and therefore he's at risk of a race ban. But, so kind of changes tune, because last week it was the penalties were justified, fair enough. Now he's saying, well, it's kind of unfair because I broke the rules, but I didn't break the rules badly enough, basically, to be justified a penalty. We have heard rumours that what they're going to try and do for stuff like this is bring back drive-thrus, so the driver can't just cut the chicane, maintain a gap and stay ahead and take a fat penalty. They will be forced to pull into the pits, take a drive-through penalty, which I think is a good idea. The question, I guess, is how quickly will those penalties be issued? Because let's say a drive-through happens, you have 2 to 3 laps to serve that penalty. If you don't, you're disqualified from the Grand Prix. But what if they don't actually issue the penalty for many laps? Because if you're Magnussen, you cut the chicane, you are going to get a drive-through, let's say, but maybe the stewards take 5, 6, 7 laps to come to that decision. Then you get another 2 or 3 laps. So theoretically, because the stewards, and as Danny Rick says, sometimes the decisions are too slow, right? Because even a drive-through penalty might not be enough of a deterrent if it's going to take a few laps for it to be actually implemented, and then by the time you've served the penalty, you've maybe achieved your aim of having a massive pit stop gap back to the car in, behind you, right? And maybe gaining position for Nico Hülkenberg in front as a result. Norris, though, talks on McLaren, says, they think they're better suited to Imola. Very interesting, right, for the rest of the season if they are really strong this weekend. McLaren think their car should be good here at Imola. It was obviously phenomenal at Miami, but the Red Bull might get somewhat better, as we'll see in a second. But he says, look, we're going to need more if we're going to challenge Ferrari and certainly Red Bull on a more consistent basis. And Ferrari have said outright this weekend they are targeting pole. That's what Charles Leclerc said. That's the goal, pole position, win the race. That is where Ferrari believe they can be, certainly where they want to be. Williams, that's not their goal. One of their goals is to reduce the weight of their car. Interesting that at the start of the season, the big talking point was about Alpine being massively overweight. But no, we talked about the sacrifices Williams have made over the winter, and apparently they are losing 4.5 tenths a lap, half a second a lap. That is an insanely big deal. If their car was on the weight limit, they would be fighting for Q3. It's no problem every single week. And if this is to be believed, they would have scored plenty of points so far this season, but that's a big issue that Williams has to resolve ASAP. Even Lewis Hamilton today was talking about his potential replacement at Mercedes, and actually has effectively now told Toto Wolff, because he said this publicly, if I was to make the decision, I would probably put Antonelli in the car. So it's very interesting for Hamilton. Obviously, it's become a thing over the last few years in Formula 1 for very young drivers to debut, and, very well-prepared young drivers to debut. Hamilton reckons, it's time to put Antonelli in the car, not Sainz, not, obviously Alonso was a talking point a while ago. That didn't happen. Alonso stayed at Aston Martin. I also don't think Hamilton would ever have wanted Alonso to be the man to take his seat, shall we say. So this maybe makes sense, and also he might think, well, Antonelli is not going to come in and outshine what I did last year necessarily, so maybe there's some sort of personal stuff in there, but I doubt it. I think Hamilton just thinks Antonelli's a damn good driver, and maybe that is the best decision for Mercedes, given that they are in a rebuild phase, and it's not exactly the end of the world if they bring on a rookie for, a couple of seasons before he really gets up to speed. Ferrari as well, you guys probably remember after Miami that Javier Marcos, right, Xavi, we are checking, which I'm going to say every time, was on the radio for Leclerc and was gone. And this is very interesting timing, right? Just because Leclerc did not seem aware that this was happening, because they didn't say, it's been great for all your time, Xavi, on the radio after the Grand Prix. They weren't aware. But Vasseur says, if you feel like you've got something better, it's always good to go for it. So I think Xavi's going to move into a different place in the organisation. But yeah, Vasseur says, look, was he the best race engineer? Probably not. We're going to bring somebody else in instead and try and keep taking steps forward. So, pretty maybe difficult decision to make. And Leclerc wasn't even asked about this, right? Maybe Leclerc would have vetoed it or said, oh no, I want to stay as it is. But no, Vasseur made this decision without Leclerc's input and says, look, this is the best thing for Ferrari. So the decision was made by Xavi, potentially himself, and the team together. I was made aware of it after Miami, so Leclerc wasn't even aware of this decision, which is pretty interesting to think about why they would have made this decision, especially without Leclerc's input, right? Not even saying, look, Leclerc, what do you think, Charles? Like, they're just saying, no, we are making this decision. It will be for the best, and you have to go along with it. So very interesting, way Ferrari is being run now compared to maybe how it has been for quite some time before. But as we go into these upgrades, this is Adrian Newey, of course, and there's been lots of talk where he goes next, whether it's anywhere at all, whether he just sails off on his yacht and retires and calls it a day in Formula 1. I made the point from day one, I don't think that was ever going to happen. Guys like Newey, he's always going to be working, and he's made this very clear in interviews since his step away from Red Bull, that, he loves work. That's what he likes to do. He's not just going to sit there and relax, and there's no way that Newey could reads the regulations for 2026, sit there and say, I'm not bothered this time. His mind's going to be working. It's just how it goes. Whether he works somewhere in Formula 1 or on some other project is another question, but he will do something. Even Christian Horner talked about Eddie Jordan, right, who is manager for Adrian Newey, which came as quite the surprise to many during that whole saga where Newey was officially out from Red Bull and left Red Bull his contract early and with no gardening leave, which was seemingly a masterstroke on the part of Eddie Jordan. Horner now said, yeah, this guy's a silent assassin, working behind the scenes to get Newey out of there and effectively, take a big dent into what Red Bull are currently building. And Newey said, so he did an interview really with Eddie Jordan on Oyster Yacht, so the yacht that he's basically had built for him, where he made the claim, and he talked about this Forrest Gump quote again, which isn't even a real quote, I think. Basically what he's saying is, look, I'm tired at the moment, but I will be back, right? And he made this very clear. It's been reported by BBC and elsewhere as well, that Newey just straight up said, I will make the return.
Love what I do, so at some point I guess I'll have a bit of a holiday. As Forrest Gump said at the end of his long run, I feel a little bit tired at the moment, but at some point I'll probably go again.
So I think every single interview that I've seen from Newey since his official announcement of his departure, everyone since then has become more and more, I'm coming back type thing. And maybe that means it's getting closer and closer together. We know that Mercedes now were in contact with Mr. Adrian Newey. We know that Aston Martin were and then were quickly probably shuffled to the sidelines. Williams is maybe a very small possibility, but the problem is Newey will need to join a team that has the resources to do what he wants to do. Joining Williams and taking them back to the top in a fairy tale land is a nice storyline on paper, but do Williams really have the resources to execute the vision that Newey probably has? They probably don't. So as nice as it would be to see that reunion, it probably ain't going to happen. The one that makes the most sense, of course, is Ferrari, and he also mentioned this, I am seriously considering changing teams and doing another 4 or 5 years. So this is, Newey's making it very clear. He's putting the cards on the table and he's saying, look, I am going to make a comeback. Probably will be taking a bit of time away from the sport now because, he was basically just trailed round in Miami, sitting on the pit wall, but not actually making any of the decisions because he's now no longer part of the Formula 1 project, only on the RB17. He will work a bit on that project to its conclusion, then he will do whatever else is necessary before probably joining another team, and Ferrari do seem the most likely. Do they need Newey? Maybe not, but would it be a help? I mean, let's be honest, going into 2026, there is no man you would rather have in your organisation than Adrian Newey. Even Max Verstappen or, whoever, Newey has been considered by many for some time the most valuable man in Formula 1, and, Ferrari aren't going to say no to the possibility, and it seems like that deal is very close to a conclusion. This, however, is Ferrari's upgrades this weekend. Will they be countered by potentially Newey-inspired upgrades on the Red Bull, or how much has Newey been involved in this Red Bull this season? That is another debate as well that is being had, certainly by those internally at Red Bull, that say, well, Newey wasn't really that much of a big deal, although some would dispute those facts, shall we say, potentially even Newey himself. This is the Ferrari. We saw these pictures the other day. The new inlets, of course, on the side pods, the new floor design. The car looks more aggressive than it previously did. There's a couple of new nice features around the halo as well, and a new rear wing, which is something to look at as well. In addition to new cooling louvers at the back of the car, the way they've repackaged the bodywork is certainly quite interesting. But of course, it is far from only Ferrari that are bringing upgrades this weekend. Aston Martin have a big upgrade package themselves, and they will need it to work substantially because they fell to being the 6th fastest car at a push really back in Miami. RB, they took the lead on them, so they will need these upgrades to work. New side pods, new floor, new front wing. The floor to me is always the interesting part because it's not something that you can necessarily see. Certainly not the Venturi tunnels under the floor. You can, however, see the edge pieces of the floor, and that is what we are going to see in a second here on the Red Bull because they are something rather interesting. Now, McLaren, I'm not sure if they've got massively new parts this weekend. They might have one or two new things, but of course it was Miami. They brought the bulk of their upgrades, and Piastri is going to have the full upgrade package. So we saw this happen last season. Norris got the first upgrade package in Austria. Piastri didn't have it. Then the next weekend, they both had it. And so, yeah, that's going to be the case for Piastri this weekend. And we'll see how that McLaren performs because Norris believes it's certainly a car that is a threat around this track. This, however, is the Red Bull upgrades. And Alberto Brega, here he is again, getting the nice close-up view. This rear wing, as you guys can see, is rather similar to what Ferrari have now done, which I think is probably a wise idea for Ferrari. But have a look at this package, right? Because this floor edge is quite something to look at. So the reporting is here that it's a new front wing on the car and also a new floor, potentially a new floor all the way down to the actual Venturi tunnels, or certainly a new floor on this edge piece. Look, we see these flaps on the edge of the floor for aerodynamic vorticity creating purposes, effectively to try and seal the floor. That's kind of, back in the day when ground effect was first a thing in the 70s, it was very strong because you could have a skirt on the side of the car that would literally take the floor down to the floor, which enabled you to absolutely seal the air in there and generate just obscene amount of downforce. Now, obviously today, they're still able to generate obscene amounts of downforce, but they can't seal the floor using a skirt, like a literally physical object. They can seal the floor using air. And this is why people that are clever at designing cars get paid a lot of money, such as Adrian Newey, because you can use the airflow around the car to create vortexes at the base of the floor to effectively seal the air within the floor so you generate more downforce. This is what some of these elements are tasked with doing. And the more efficient and the more effective you can make that, and the more downforce therefore you can generate, the better, generally speaking. So this piece of the floor, like, look, we've seen people do this with some, kind of click up kind of elements on the floor, but something to this extreme is pretty, I haven't seen anything to quite this level in quite some time, and this is Red Bull doing something they believe is quite substantial. That was the feeling of Helmut Marko before the weekend, that this is a sizable package. They're expecting major progress in this package this weekend from Red Bull, so Ferrari may move forward by 3/4 tenths of a second. Red Bull, how much package, how much upgrade does this package give them? Is it a tenth? Is it a couple of tenths? Is it more than that? Because if it is, we are going to see a Max Verstappen W, I imagine, this weekend. Although, who knows? It's a key weekend here, Imola, because this sets the trajectory. If Red Bull are back on form and, Miami was just a blip, and they win the race comfortably, it's over for the season. But if Ferrari were to win or to secure pole, or if McLaren were to be up there, and Red Bull weren't to be as strong as maybe we thought they might be, then we really have a season on our hands here, right? And Max Verstappen is pretty chill. Of course, he has 2 races this weekend because he's also racing in like the 24-hour of Nürburgring, maybe remotely in his motorhome on his iRacing setup. So, what this Max guy is incredible, isn't he? Really, like he's racing the Imola Grand Prix and doing what he has to do for his Formula 1 project. But really, this guy's a sim racer who just does Formula 1 as a hobby. That's kind of how I read this whole thing sometimes. New upgrades for Mercedes as well. This is their new side pod design, which is pretty interesting. I mean, you can kind of see the heavy undercut that is now going through. I feel like this looks slightly slimmer compared to what it did before, but the side pod inlets are still the same. it doesn't look massively different to me. This, by the way, is the Mercedes like kind of elements on the side of the floor, which are, similar in some sense. They're quite dramatic. They stick up quite a way. But the fact that the Red Bull ones, they don't just stick up and all do the same thing. You see what I mean? Like, you see how those Mercedes ones are quite, consistent in their design. What was interesting about the Red Bull ones is that they're not consistent in their shape or design. They seem to be designed and placed very deliberately in some ways, that it's kind of difficult to determine whether it's going to be fast or not, but it's Red Bull, so more than likely it is going to be fast. There's also a new beam wing for Mercedes this weekend, which is the part further down. The rear wing basically looks the same. So yeah, they are changing things, Mercedes. The feeling is that maybe with the upgrades they brought last weekend or last time out in Miami, they may be somewhat better placed when the package can work together. But it's unclear how much difference that is actually going to make. Also interesting, Fred Vasseur made a couple of statements on Lewis Hamilton, talking about why he joined and how he joined. I think he even made the statement that they never leaked anything from Ferrari, and it was a UK outfit that leaked it somehow. But look, Vasseur says it was known about for a long time and it wasn't leaked, which was good from the Ferrari side. But he says that it wasn't even difficult to tempt Hamilton to join. I think he had it in his mind for ages. This year, for several reasons, including the fact that he had an option to leave Mercedes, that we had a seat available, which is interesting to say, right? Because, the seat was kind of available, I guess, but people kind of thought that, well, Sainz was going to stay unless something crazy happens. So I guess technically they did have a seat available, but it's like, would you consider the Sainz seat available for anybody else? Kind of makes me think that they wanted to get rid of Sainz anyway, possibly, but then tweet your thoughts in the comments. We had a good relationship. It was the right time for each of us. I think it's a good opportunity for him and for us. So very much tweet your thoughts in the comments. Friday and Saturday should be dry at Imola, but there is talk about rain on Sunday for this weekend's Grand Prix, and it would be very interesting if this forecast potentially comes true. So hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.